My name's Abbie. I'm the co-founder and CEO at CompareEthics, and for about 10 years I've been working with governments, NGOs, SMEs to build impact strategies and then communicate them. So I worked a lot with customers at the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, right across to the Confederation of British Industry, which represents businesses to the UK government. The issue that I found through all of this work was I was living press release to press release. None of the work that I did was ever really integrated into a business to make it inherently better for the planet and the people and their stakeholders. So I just felt really uncomfortable with the work that I was doing, which is hence why I then spent the last 3 years building CompareEthics, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail later today. But because of that policy background, and because of the change that we're seeing in the market of how there's this big pressure cooker for businesses right now, where governments are requiring businesses to have better data on their ESG and sustainability claims, employees don't want to work at companies that are not being serious and authentic on this issue, but very importantly, we just don't have any time left to really be wasting on this, and so a lot of what I now focus on with CompareEthics is all around how do we make sure that companies are not misleading their stakeholders on their environmental and social agenda. So let's dive in. Thank you. So, I mean, you might not be able to see the slides because it's quite white background, but just quick show of hands. Who knows what greenwashing is? Okay, good amount. And then same show of hands for, does anyone know what the Green Claims Code is? Interesting, okay, we've got one, okay, good. Okay, so hopefully this will be useful, I'm very excited about that. So greenwashing is essentially when companies are misleading their customers and exaggerating the amount of progress they're making on their environmental agenda. And the Green Claims Code is a new regulation that has been launched by the Competition and Markets Authority, and it requires businesses to have a few things in place, and so as citizens it enables us to ask companies questions and hold them to account. So today we're going to go into some of those things so that for any of the brands that you like or you want more information on, you'll be able to take that away and ultimately be able to get to the right information to help you make those purchasing decisions. So yeah, let's dig in. So, next slide, sorry, thank you. So, I'm just going to give you the backdrop of the Green Claims Code. So now I need to do two thank yous. I've just realised it's not only a sunny afternoon, but we're also talking about regulation on a sunny afternoon, so you have to hopefully stay with me, and I hope you've had some caffeine. But so this week, you might have seen that H&M has had to take down a lot of their environmental claims because the Norwegian government have said they're breaking the law. So when I say about the Green Claims Code in the UK, this law has also been going on in Norway, in France, in the EU. Walmart was fined £5 million for saying that bamboo was really better for the planet, and it was rayon and it was covered in chemicals. So there is no time like the present to be a really empowered citizen to say, hello, this is not compliant, you're not correct, and there's a better way of doing this. Boohoo, Asda and George and ASOS are being investigated by the CMA. You may have seen the Boohoo Kourtney Kardashian one, but what's also interesting is that even today there was an investigation done by iMagazine that has found that Boohoo have accidentally labelled loads of things as part of their conscious collection just by accident. So this just is it's not good enough, it's sloppy, and ultimately it's really actually bad for their brand. You know, for millions of pounds is one thing. H&M now probably actually going to be on the back foot against all of their competitors for Christmas, that's another thing. But brand loss, brand value, all of those things that I talked about around attracting and retaining the best talent, these are the things over the long term that these brands are just not going to be able to recruit. So, a lot to dig into. So how can we help these brands get there? Before we dive into that, the first thing to also mention is that all of this backdrop is from a global survey that was done by lots of different regulators, and they found that 40% of businesses, when they did an online sweep, were found to be misleading customers. So taking snapshots of H&M and all these companies are just examples in actually what is quite a lot of companies doing this online already. And we hired a company to do some research for us, and we found that 83% of citizens don't actually trust what brands tell them. So not only have you got brands misleading, you also have an environment where people don't believe what people say anyway. So how can we actually move forward? Because ultimately there is a really big opportunity to get this conversation right. Ultimately, in order for us to move forward, we have to get the right information there. So, next slide please. Rule 1, be sure that claims are truthful and accurate. This sounds really obvious, but hands up if anyone knows what the word sustainable means. Or eco-friendly. So it's much as you'll have an opinion and the person next to you will have an opinion, and I guarantee by the time that we've got everyone's, no one would have said the same thing. There are really, really vague claims that don't really tell you anything about that product. So we need to be really specific. So if you see vague terms, conscious, responsible, call it out. What do you mean? Like, what does that actually mean? You know, we want people to be specific. Like, this is 80% recycled polyester. We can have a debate about that another time. Maybe we need some afternoon beverages or something like that to have that debate. But maybe this is like 80% recycled. But please note that in washing this still shreds microplastics. That's a responsible claim. It's better than an average alternative because it's not a virgin recycled. And maybe again we could go into that. I know that the last Safia was doing a great job on like how we move from fossil fuel based, but just using that as an example. It's around being super specific on the claims that we need to make when we're buying product, whether that's new or second hand. Next slide. So this is also to dig into this, is that there also needs to have a lot of data that also make those claims clear. So it might be talking about the level of certification that they've had to back that up, but we'll come on to that in more detail. Thank you. Claims must not omit or hide any important relevant information. So this is more around what we're saying of staying with microfibers. One, that's a really great example of where if you create a claim, you need to make sure that there are other bits that there hasn't been left out. So for example, if I was Boohoo and I'm testing new product lines that are better than my average product, I also need to, as a brand, be responsible and say, this collection represents 1% of our total product catalogue, right? So that's probably an example. They still would have to have enough data to make these claims. Me and my team talk about this all the time. We don't even have that. Anyway, the key point is we need to contextualise this for every person to understand where that business is at on the journey. We can't leave out really important information just to make it feel good for that moment in time. This can be the same for things like imagery. At the amount of time that I think it was like over lockdown, Amazon or someone had this advert that was like, oh, all of our factories are doing X, Y, Z, but they didn't give a percentage of the amount of factories actually had renewable energy, and I was like, 100 sounds really large, but what is that percentage-wise? So we always need to think, like, what is the data that you're omitting? Like, are we reshaping that data to make it look better than it is? That's the next slide. So, comparisons must be fair and meaningful. So this is the concept of not comparing apples to pears. So what do we mean by this? So we can't compare a conventional cotton t-shirt against a polyester t-shirt because they're two very different impact materials. It wouldn't produce a fair outcome. And this is General's advertising standards regulations. So even if you had a toothbrush, let's say that toothbrush was saying, this toothbrush is the best in the world, you're never going to have to buy another one for 10 years. They would have to compare that to a market average alternative. So the same rules apply here when we're talking about environmental claims. You can't make one product compared to another when it's not against the same material type or a really specific alternative, if that makes sense. But we'll dive into a lot of this just to say that we're going to go into a lot of Q&A and hash some of this out. So please do start thinking of questions because I definitely wanted to say to be a little bit more like a conversation around the topic because it is a very debated one, and so very keen to hear people's thoughts. Would people even feel like they would know how to spot that? I mean, that's a whole other thing that I get very frustrated with, is that I don't feel like as a citizen I even know what to compare against in some instances. So I think it's really on the business to be really clear to say that this organic cotton t-shirt has no pesticides, and then there's a clear asterisk next to it, not admitting any data, and being fair comparison to say this is compared to a conventional cotton t-shirt, which would have pesticides, right? So we need to have the right information, it has to be contextualised. Excellent. Okay. Hands up if anyone knows what a life cycle analysis is. We've got a couple. Okay, so the life cycle analysis of a product is where we look at all the different inputs that go into making that product. Some of the life cycle analysis that exists will also consider what happens after it's been purchased, so the impact of it being used by us, worn by us, and then chucked away by us. So within the new regulations, it requires every business to have considered the full life cycle of that product to make that better than the average claim. So you can't say, I've got this amazing packaging, it biodegrades, therefore my product is better. It's just not going to wash. And so we need to consider all of those impacts in total to say that it's better than an average. And it sounds really obvious. However, you would be very surprised, so many businesses do not do this, they don't consider it, and a lot of the time they accidentally get this really, really wrong because they've picked, again, the right amount of data for it to look good. And there is a whole debate and a whole industry just on debating life cycle analysis, because there are obviously so many ways to skin a cat. And there is the regulation, what it doesn't do is tell you what life cycle assessment that you need to use. So as citizens, what we can do is just simply ask the brand or business, have you got a life cycle analysis on this product? If so, like normally a lot of companies will provide a link to that, so it can actually help you see how they're comparing that product to an average. Many of them might not disclose it, but there are many brands that are very transparent about these things. Like Reformation is a really great example. They actually have on their website exactly how they calculate their claims. So yes, on to the next. Yes, this is where I spend a lot of my time in the data. So again, third apology for the day. We're talking about policy, it's sunny, and I'm now going to talk about supply chain data. So depending on where you're coming from today, this could be a little bit dry, but please do stay with me. I find it very exciting. So, most people will tell you there isn't even really data that exists out there for us to be able to back this up. This is not true. Actually, it's just really highly fragmented. Someone knows where that product travelled from and how it travelled. Someone knows what was the energy consumption in the factory, in the mill. What was the, was it done by renewable energy? Was it done by different means to produce this product? Another thing that we work really closely with is certification bodies. So what we've done at Compare Ethics is we have created a data quality ranking score that will give the brand a really clear score to say, if you're using Gott's Organic Cotton, this is a high quality certification, we check that it's in date, we check that it's tied to that purchase order, we really do our homework to make sure that it's a good quality data so that you and your customers will have really high confidence on those claims that you're compliant, where there are other standards and certifications that don't do a lot of the checking behind the scenes. And so they have lower quality scores that we don't recommend. So for example, interesting one, any vegans here by chance? Okay, great. So PETA is a self-certified certification. So a lot of brands will self-certify that they tick a box to say, yes, my product is certified. And as someone who is also plant-based, I was very surprised by this, but it gives you an example that even some standards don't go onto site and check, cool, yep, no glues are in there, etc., that have got any plant or animal derivatives. So there is a lot to be said just for looking at the right standards, and that's what we're really here to do, is look at what is actually going on under the hood. And there isn't so much to be done there, because I think if we can get that right and say what good data looks like, then us as citizens, we can actually start saying to brands like, hey, you're using PETA, have you thought about using Cruelty-Free International? Very different standard, in my opinion. And I think these are the sorts of things that will hope raise the standard overall and create a lovely feedback loop on a system that will demand ultimately a higher and higher bar of standards for environmental and social inputs. So I could do a whole session on that alone. But naturally this shouldn't fall on us as citizens to do this, but there are some really great tools out there. Good on you, I think one of them was here earlier in the day, really great free resource to get information on brands that are rated. They focus more on publicly available information, but on a brand level. I would say if you want brands that are verified and have had data behind them that's been checked, please do ask us. We're on Instagram, happy to share some of the brands that we work with. Equally, we're really open to finding businesses that you feel that are not compliant or potentially misleading, so do let us know. We then talk to the brands and see if they want to be verified. Fashion Revolution, also here earlier, an amazing resource as you may already know. So I think leaning on these resources, continuing to shout about the different questions, so where's the data? Have you got a life cycle assessment? Please can you be more specific? If you come away with anything from today and only those 3 questions, I think it really helps create this nudge effect towards businesses really getting much better data on their products so that we can actually move the agenda forward and stop misleading environmental claims. So I'm going to hand over in a second for questions, so please do jump in. Just for a very little bit about us and what we do. So we verify that data at a product level that we talked about, and we then will tell the end user, the citizens, exactly how that product is better than the average. We can tell customers how much CO2 saving that product has, what's the water saving on that product. We will also support businesses to make sure that they are actually compliant. So, and anyone who says, well, why are you incentivised if they're paying you? I get this all the time, and I sleep at night knowing well that they pay us, but we also take on that legal risk. So what that means is, it's our legal duty to make sure that they're compliant. So I'm incentivised as a business to always say no more than I am to say yes. And these are the sorts of things that I find are really important. That yes, we're working with brands, but our incentive structure is there to make sure that they are doing exactly what they say they're doing. I've spoken far too long. I really hope people have questions on this that we can dive into. So yeah, does anyone want to open it up? Yes, please go ahead.
When you say you compare to the average, how do you, well obviously I know what an average is, but how do you calculate the average? Because obviously there's differences depending on the company and things like that.
Yeah, great question, and that's a hugely debated topic. So up until about 3 months ago, there was within the fashion industry, it's pretty standard that if you wanted to make a carbon saving claim, you could make an average saving based on lots of global averages. So there's lots of databases that we have and that we've created, and we also have like a live baseline. So every time a new brand puts data in, it adds to the average baseline, if that makes sense. Interesting though, Norway have come out and said that actually global averages are not necessarily the best way to make those claims. So we're now adding to our calculator to create regional averages. So if I produced in Southeast Asia, I'm going to compare to wider Southeast Asia production processes, for example, as part of when I'm looking at it, because that's really important. We also work with lots of brands that do regenerative agriculture and things like that, so we're also looking at ways that we can get more and more specific, because currently the current averages data doesn't really allow for really innovative models to look good on there, because you put regenerative input into an average calculator and it doesn't actually do that much to change it. So we need to be able to do more to shout about really good work. So it's a huge industry in of itself just to get the average data. So yeah, great question. Hi.
Hi. Just on the green claims code, you mentioned way, is it law?
Yeah.
Taking action against H&M, and do we have, is it law
actually, everyone thinks it's like a new piece of legislation. It's actually consumer protection law. Yeah, so that's why it's called the Green Claims Code, but it's all part of consumer protection law. And that's what I'm saying. As a consumer, this is your rights, and this has all been developed based on protecting consumers from misleading claims. And so this is the same in Norway, this is the same in the US. Everything that we've put into the Compare Ethics platform is to comply with environmental claims within consumer protection law. It's super specific. Obviously we want to scale that out for, you know, due diligence regulations that come out next year. There's obviously so much we can expand into. But yeah, this is for us. So, and this is, you know, happening right now. So there's a huge opportunity for everyone just to get involved. I know that the CMA actually have their own website dedicated to citizens. So if you just put in the Green Claims Code, I think it's like the first or second one down, there's a whole campaign page as well. So it's just easy to share, and it just raises people awareness around that these are our rights, and the CMA is already doing a stellar job looking at it. Brands are actually working really hard to comply, like, don't get me wrong, like, this is also like everyone's in the same boat, but I feel like in order for us to keep the momentum, we need all of us to keep pushing. Right. Anyone else have any more they want to give them to, or any? Oh yeah, there's two here. Yeah. Yeah.
So what happens if somebody is a brand that is doing like an investment pitch and they have greenwashed it and lied about their instructions? Is there anything to do about that?
Oh my gosh, this is like really close to my heart. This is a great question. This is something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm getting quite deep on a Saturday afternoon, so I've gone everywhere this afternoon. So I fundamentally believe that, and I will get to your question, sorry. I fundamentally believe that if we can prove that having a verified data set at a product level, which is 90% of a business's impact, is more powerful than publicly available data, the financial market will move towards only backing in businesses who have that right verifiable data set. There is a reason why Boohoo can get a AAA rating 1 week from a financial rating agency and then have the situation in Leicester a few weeks later, because it's all based on self-disclosed information that no one is auditing, that no one is checking. There is a lot within the financial markets regulatory side that will require businesses to have better data, audited data on ESG, but my view is that if we can verify it based on what actually is going on under the hood, it's more powerful for citizens, it's more powerful for the business, and again, the incentive structure shifts. I'm actually a complete cynic. No one's really going to do this unless we have regulators and you know, they feel that pressure. So I feel like the ultimate pressure is money talks the strongest, right? So that's where, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but that's where, yes, they are being increasingly called out for misleading within the environment, within the financial market. It's a different example, but really relevant. In Germany, an asset manager, gosh, I should apologise, I'm now talking about finance. An asset manager has actually been investigated for fraud. So we're talking about criminal investigations in some countries for misleading their stakeholders on ESG claims. Like, that's so, I mean, it's exciting for us, but like obviously horrible for them. But that's my point, is like, it is actually massively picking up in every vertical. It's not just fashion. People are like, had enough. And so, yeah, I hope that answered the question somewhere in there. Hi.
I think you might have partially answered it before, but is your kind of opinion that the policy is like the best way forward to getting like these companies held accountable, like do the right thing, but also if so, do there need to be like more policy tighter, or do you want to say that next step of people out there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I actually feel like there's no silver bullet. I feel like citizens play a really important role because ultimately, like, we're the purchasers of those products, the users of those products. I feel that regulators play a really important role to create the tipping point, if you like, because that is always doing really quickly. but again, employees, we're the workforce, we get to say where we want to work. And I think that in this market, when I was at the Confederation of British Industry, one of the companies there was a mining company, and this was before David Attenborough's Blue Planet effect or any of this sort of thing, and they were so struggling to get talent to come and work for them. And so if that was happening before, think of what it's going to be, 3 to 5 years from now. All the top people in the market are just not going to go this. So I think that all of this creates a pressure cooker, as I say. I don't think anyone will do it. From a policy point of view, because we work within policy, there's nothing worse than bad regulation. So I'd rather have less regulation, and it's good, it's well thought through, and that it actually moves the needle, and that there's no room for people to skirt around things. Like the EU's Due Diligence Act, like the EU's Green Deal, there's some really great stuff in there that, all being well, should land and make sure that this does happen in the way we want it to. But there's still a lot of work to go to get that right, definitely.
Just a follow-up, so it says you enable businesses. Do businesses have to come to you, or you said about the Confederation of British Businesses? Because it's an amazing thing you're doing, I think. There's so many. I'm just thinking about greenwashing, net zero, carbon neutral flights, for example. Those companies or those airlines are allowed to say, we've got carbon neutral flights now to walk around the forest in Peru, and it's all nonsense, basically. Those forests are up in flames, and there's a whole mess of that. Similarly, how are you able to get in there with businesses who just don't want to do it? H&M's are going to come to you and be like, what, can you check out how to supply chain?
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. Because there's a lot because this is now a board issue, right? So you'll be. That's what I mean. This year, we haven't really spent much money on marketing. It's because businesses. You have to bear in mind, most of the teams are not set up for this. Most of the teams are set up to be sustainability specialists, ethical trading specialists. There will be there's increasingly ESG teams that more speak to investor relations, but there's no one really to help you do this at scale, to help you get that right at product level at scale. So we've definitely seen that, and the way that we do it is always looking at, for each vertical, there'll be different sets of data quality ranking that we can do. So for example, in some instances when we talk about regenerative agriculture, so there's or carbon offsetting, so the gold standard is a really good standard within the offsetting market that we can look to. There are loads of other platforms though that actually use, I'm going to geek out now on tech, oh gosh, I've gone full circle here, but geospatial awareness, where you actually track forest change over time. There's so many different types of data points that we can plug our system into, and then our machine learning will read it and rank it based on the quality of that data. So it really is an exciting time to have a really huge opportunity, but you're right, it's really hard. Yeah.
And is that sort of based on what you said in your question, investors want to know that the companies that they're pouring their money into are not going to have a scandal.
100%, yeah.
The size of
Exactly. I mean, the ESG financial market is $5 trillion. It's huge. And the other week, lots and lots of funds, so products, financial products, just got completely taken the labels off. So someone went along and was like, okay, are we compliant? How are we looking? And loads of things just came down, right? Because in some cases within the financial market, I don't know how we got onto this, but some times in the financial market, just the absence of arms and cigarettes can get a product label as ESG. So just to put it in context, when we talk about ESG within finance, it's actually more around a risk profile rather than delivering a better impact for people and the planet in lots of instances. So for those people that would debate that with me, again, we'll need a whole other afternoon with beverages and maybe outside in the sun for that one, but it's very much a different view, but a really, really powerful one. Okay, I know I'm getting 5 minutes thumbs up out of time, but yeah, I'm going to be around, so if anyone has any more questions, let me know. Thanks again for staying with me on this, and yeah, looking forward to hearing from you, from anyone that wants to get in touch. Thank you.